welcome to this episode of our program Daily Debate. As usual, we will be discussing an important issue. Today we'll be speaking or focusing on the Egyptian economy at large, particularly in the recent periods when Egypt has managed to achieve consecutive successful achievements that were highly praised by international rating institutions. That is, besides several initiatives that were raised by the leadership, plus, of course, many of the foreign meetings the President held himself in order to promote for the Egyptian economy, plus opening horizons of cooperation between Egypt and world countries. We'll be speaking about that in our episode. Before we delve into our discussion, let me first welcome our distinguished guest, Dr. Ibrahim Hegazy, Professor of Economics. Thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. And before we go on with discussing, or we start with our discussion, let's first have this report. And President Sisi discusses developing maritime industries with Germany's Lausanne. Let's watch.
Hegazy discussed with Peter Lürsen, the CEO of the German shipbuilding company Lürsen, developing the maritime industry in Egypt. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassem Radi said that President Sisi and Lürsen discussed the plans for the technological development needed for this strategic industry, especially in light of the Egyptian state's keenness to upgrade all aspects of the maritime industry and shipbuilding. Radi said that the President also affirmed that this goal requires comprehensive development in the training of manpower, including engineers and technicians. The meeting was attended by Commander of the Egyptian Navy Ahmed Khalid, Head of the Naval Armaments Department Mohammed Shalabi, and Mohammed De'il Maghzangi from the Naval Forces Command. The Head of State also met with Jan-Pieter de Nul, the owner of the Belgian Jan de Nul Group for Marine Engineering and Dredging, where they discussed Egypt's promising opportunities in this field and how to achieve them within the framework of the State Strategy for Sustainable Development, Egypt 2030. The meeting falls within the framework of Egypt's interest in upgrading the industry, which requires comprehensive development in workforce training, including that for engineers and technicians.
Right, welcome back. And Dr. Ibrahim, we start with the meetings the President held because those were very important meetings. Two meetings exactly, one with the German and the other with the Belgian.
Yes.
Let me take your
first of all, I think these two important meetings are right on time. The German one, the Lürsen group, is specialized in fast petrol boats and offshore petrol vessels, frigates, mine-wear vessels, and naval support vessels. And you can see that the reason for this meeting is actually to protect our economic development that takes place offshore. That's number one. Aside, of course, from military protections of all the shores of Egypt, whether on the north or on the east side. So this is very important. It gives a message of power and strength, not just to support the military, but also to protect. So these are not offensive, but rather they are defensive in terms of protecting our economic development and oil or petroleum explorations offshore. And the other line of environment, which is the Belgian Donnel Group of Marine Work. We specialize in dredging, in environment, soil remediations, sediment treatment, water treatment, offshore marine developments, platforms, floating platforms. So that also means that we are trying to help our economic developments. Because if you look at Egypt exports, they are predominantly now on gas, natural gas, on petroleum, and luckily, alhamdulillah, we have also gold explorations and concessions.
Yes.
So this is all has to be protected. And obviously, many of our future resources are not going to be onshore; they're going to be offshore. So I think these are very important meetings that came right on time, in addition to the regional challenges that Egypt is currently facing.
Let's a little bit explain this significance of this German shipbuilding company. Because we're speaking about the maritime industry, or boosting the maritime industry at large. So we're speaking from two sides, the industrial one, and of course the protection and of our interests. So let me have your info of how the German shipbuilding company is going to help Egypt. What is expected?
Okay. Let's first of all look at the macro picture of why such meeting is important.
Yes.
If we look at Egypt 2030 strategic sustainable vision, you can see that one of the goals is that Egypt would be an active global player. And that's very clear. On Egypt 2030, Egypt is aiming to be an active global player. Also, the second goal is also about the efficiency of our services that we are producing. So obviously Germans, it's not just to help in developing vessels and boats, but actually when you look at the report that was just at the beginning of this episode, you can realize the value of technical and training of our staff, our personnel. Why? Because this is what will make Egypt a global player. We are not just importing vessels or how to develop vessels and ships, but rather it is about our HR development. And you see even the meeting was attended by many of the commanders in the naval.
Yes,
and that means that it's not just an agreement for military products or naval products, but it's also for technical assistance and training. I think this is very important.
Yes, indeed. Before we go on with our discussion, I guess we have to just have a break, or we go even to our next report. And Egypt, the European Union discussed joint relations, areas of future cooperation within the framework of the government 2023-2027 strategy. Let's watch and we'll come back.
Minister of International Cooperation Rania Al-Mashat met with Christian Berger, the ambassador of the European Union in Cairo, to look into the progress made through joint cooperation within the framework of the strategic partnership between Egypt and the EU. Ministry of International Cooperation clarified in a statement that they also discussed future areas of cooperation within the 2021-2027 strategy, which is also within the framework of the government of Egypt's National Development Agenda. Last February, the European Commission inaugurated the European Union's Neighbourhood, Development and International Cooperation Instrument for the period between 2021 to 2027. The instrument aims to stimulate long-term social and economic recovery in the countries that are neighbouring Europe through mobilizing private and public investment in the next decade. The new plan focuses on 5 key areas: human development, resilience and prosperity to support resilient sustainable economies, peace, security and helping countries address their challenges, migration and mobility to address challenges of forced displacement and irregular migration, environment, energy and climate change to protect natural resources and promote green growth. Al-Mashat affirmed that the objectives of the EU's NDICI and the strategy of the Ministry of International Cooperation are in line with the government of Egypt's development priorities with regards to the transformation towards a green economy, renewable energy, sustainable infrastructure, digital transformation, gender equality, healthcare, social safety nets and education. The minister suggested that the EU expands blended finance tools to boost private investments in Egypt and to stimulate the implementation of sustainable projects, especially in the agriculture sector and the development of rural communities. Al-Mashat also discussed the development funds agreed upon with the EU during the past year. The health sector received a budget support that was directed to the implementation of the state's homegrown response plan to COVID-19 at a value of 89 million euros. The energy sector budget support programs as well received a financing worth 60 million euros, and the water sector budget support program was funded with 160 million euros. She stressed the need to maximize the use of these development agreements by coordinating with government entities and line ministries to enhance the country's development strategy. Christian Berger, the ambassador of the EU in Cairo, shared that the bilateral cooperation between the EU and Egypt is important in supporting the state's efforts to achieve sustainable development. Egypt was part of the EU Single Support Framework 2017 to 2020 that has allocated up to 538 million euros to support the development of several state sectors, including energy, environment, social protection, governance, capacity building, and civil society. The current cooperation portfolio between Egypt and the EU amounts to 1.35 billion euros in development financing.
Right, welcome back, and back to you, Dr. Ibrahim. And returning back to what we were speaking about, and this industry, or this sector of industry, is very promising. And how do you view the Egyptian promising opportunities in this field, especially at this upcoming stage?
We have to look at our competitive advantage. And obviously our competitive advantage is in areas which are almost offshore. Why? Because we have petroleum now, we have natural gas, which is, we are one of the main global exporters of natural gas now. And then forthcoming also is the petrochemical industries, especially complexes that are on the Suez Canal zone and on the Ain Sokhna. So these are actually areas of importance for our developments. And that's why protecting our shores, enable and developing platforms is very important.
Yes. Here we're speaking about achieving this boost in this industry within the framework of, as you said respectively here, the Sustainable Development or Egypt's Vision 2030. How to achieve those goals, or what is required from such a sector, and what requirements do we need for achieving that goal?
I think a couple of directions we have to focus in, and I hope that the current government is actually doing it. Number one is technical education. It has to be really more focused than the traditional conventional education. Why? Because if we are going to be directing our export and our competitive advantage in such industrial areas, then we need the right HR, not manpower. And not only in digital terms, those who are in IT, but also those who are actually blue collars. And that's why technical education, according to the 2030 strategic plan of Egypt, then it is expected to raise it from 30% of our graduates to almost 80% of our graduates. And I think this is very important. The second one, and I was very happy to hear that we have 10 universities that ranked very high in scientific research. And so this is another dimension where we have to focus in the area of scientific research, and how can we develop the know-how that can build our sustainability. Truly, you can import at the beginning the know-how. The sustainability does not rely predominantly always on importing the know-how. We have to build our know-how by ourselves. So this is why the Zuwayl University was ranked #1 in Egypt and the 10th, I think, in the Middle East in terms of scientific research. So this is the second. The third is to encourage more, and I think this was a comment made by the very positive report of the IMF in July 2021, which is almost this month, when the group came and to evaluate the developments of Egypt. So that they mentioned the challenge that Egypt is facing, which they actually mentioned before in the early 2020 and the early 2021 as well. You need to get more engagement of the private sector, and then release more the governmental control of certain industries. And I think these are very important if you want to see how can we pursue the 2030 challenge. These are very important.
Indeed, indeed. When we speak about industry at large, then industry used or is supposed to be one of the most important sectors in any economy or in any country in the whole world.
Yeah.
It should be a base for the revenue or for the sustainable revenue.
Sure.
I think that recently we have been trying as much as possible, and the leadership has been trying as much as possible to boost some of the industries in Egypt.
Yes.
From your point of view, how do you view the efforts that were made so far? What were the measures that were taken in this pretext?
Again, industry needs infrastructure. Industry needs energy. Aside, of course, from, again, manpower and machinery, but they need infrastructure, and that's why you see many of our mega projects are basically in highways and infrastructure. Second, they need energy, so that's why we are luckily, nowadays we have a surplus of energy provision, and that's why we're trying even to export and build some kind of relationship with certain neighboring countries to export for them our energy. So these are our two factors. And the third one is actually, we don't see it now, but I think this was the right move a couple of years ago, which is the development of the new communities outside the Nile Valley. And these are very important factors that we can rely on if you want to develop industries. Plus, I want to badge back to the strategic plan of Egypt 2030, where, and I think the president actually had a meeting a couple of days ago with the prime minister and a couple of other ministers regarding that the development, the plans, the strategic plans of the government has to be synchronized with the local governorates plans. For the simple reasons that different governorates will require different industrial developments, because our natural resources are scattered, not just in one governorate, and they are scattered different in different governorates. So the planning of the governorates should actually take a step higher than the government plans. They should be linked together. So it should not be top down, but should be bottom up.
Yes, let me just explain this in a simple way so people would understand exactly. So we're speaking about an integral strategy that would link the whole process, or the industry with the energy sector, with the infrastructure sector. I mean, you mean here utilizing all the tools of the country and institutions of the country all together in order to...
No, I mean that we have 28 governorates.
Yes.
Okay? And some of them are on the delta side, some others are on the upper Egypt,
yes,
some other on the shore areas of Egypt. Obviously, in these different governorates, there are different natural resources. And these different natural resources will require different manpower, different skills, and they require different know-how. So the integration here, as you were trying to lead to, which is appropriately right, is that we have to look at these governorates and what available natural resources are existing on them, so that we can build the strategic plan of Egypt based on the individual governorates' natural resources. So that's what I mean. Instead of saying, oh, we want to build into petrochemicals, for instance, where are we going to develop this?
We're not speaking, I mean here, weren't there some of the logistic hubs and industrial sites, complexes that were built in Egypt for such industries?
Well, the answer is, the question is where? They are built where the natural resources
in the Suez Canal,
Suez canals, and actually in Safaga
economic
and the other
zone,
areas,
and yes,
the Golden Triangle, as I talk about it.
Yes.
Then this simply means that the strategic plan of this area is part of the strategic plan of Egypt.
Yes.
This is not a generic strategic plan where we want to be good in 1, 2, 3, 4, but we have to look at which areas of Egypt will develop the natural resources. And that's why in every governorate, or at least every region of Egypt, will have a different development plan.
So we're speaking here about...
This is what I call bottom-up. I mean, it is
we
from
have
base
to start from the base
and
until
see
we
where
reach
our
the top.
natural resources existing, and then we develop in these local governorates or regions the development strategic plans, and then we link it with Egypt's strategic vision.
Right. Yes, definitely. That's a big look from the big picture. But inside the industries themselves, we're speaking about industry, and industry is a very important sector that has been suffering from some of the problems.
Yes.
Beside definitely the natural resources and how to link the natural resources with the industrial places. But there are some industries that have witnessed some of the collapses. We're speaking about, for instance, the textile. We're speaking, for instance, about several other industries that have been suffering. So from your point of view, what kind of boost do those sectors of industries need at this upcoming stage?
It's a very sensitive question, and I need to have my sensitive answer as well, because I'm against privatization, but at the same time I'm also against personally the injection of more funds in existing ailing industries. Why? Because we are today in the 2021 post-pandemic. We are on the digital. We are now at a time where people like Virgin and people like Bezos have went now commercial, flights as astronauts. So we are in a different world. We are in a digital, high-tech world. So even when you try to inject, you have to look where the future is. It's not just relying on the old-fashioned, industries which Egypt was very dominant in at a time now where these are very traditional industries, and we are neglecting the fact that other countries have been developed in other areas which are highly needed for 2021 and onwards. So that's why my answer for your question is we have to be very skeptical, at least cautious, about which industry should we inject our funds, new funds in. Instead of injecting, we have to start creating new industries which fit the competitive world that we are in.
Actually, we're speaking here about a very important issue which is moving on and coping with the world's transformation.
Exactly.
And Egypt has been working for some time for transforming the country into digitization and sophisticated technology and all this. How far do you think that the leadership has been so keen to transform the country into another horizon of what I mean here is how far has the leadership been insisting on developing the country in order to be able to transform into the area where we need to.
Sure.
This is from one side. Please go ahead, and then we'll go to the
Very clear. Financial inclusion is number one. So that's mean digitalizing the whole financial sector. The e-government, that's number two, and you see so many now of our public services are offered digitally. And the third one, which is for me extremely important, although there is a debate about it, is what is taking place now in the reform of education. Digitalizations or technology is not pertaining only to hardwares, and it's not pertaining only to softwares. But on top of all of this is the human mind that can work on the whole software and the hardware. So that's why the government and the president are doing what it is needed to change the infrastructure to be a digital infrastructure. But we still are lagging behind in the human development of a digital mindset.
Would that be a cornerstone or a base for what we are speaking today of this new republic?
The new republic, for me, is the infrastructure. Definitely, yes, it is a new republic. Infrastructure-wise, and you see, I had the chance of visiting with visitors from abroad, the new administrative capital and the new communities developed. You can see, and the infrastructure highways that you have, and you see now the trains, the railways, a lot of developments are taking place to move Egypt to be comparative to other neighboring countries like the United Arab Emirates, like Saudi Arabia. I'm not talking about the West, I'm talking still about the East side and neighboring Middle East countries, which went a lot of way in the digital and technology high-tech area. So we are doing a good job in this one. But are we doing a good job to make the manpower and ready for it? How to use it? That's the question, and that's the challenge. And unfortunately, I'm not happy with what I see as a debate for the reform of education in Egypt. We focus this on Thanawi Amma, and it's not about Thanawi Amma. It's about a mindset of the new generation, which what we call it the Gen Z generation, those who were born on the 1990s onward. These individuals, in addition to what happened during the pandemic, definitely they are digital generation, and that's why if they are not competitive with others who are from competing nations, then we'll be lagging behind, even if we have the best infrastructure. But the mindset and the manpower is extremely important.
Imagine, sir, that this is a very important topic you're speaking about, and even more. I mean, here preparing generations
Yes.
for this upcoming stage, and that the period of the coronavirus was definitely one of the exams or the big experience our children had through going on their studies online, digital. I don't know, my son anyway was at university. He did all his education this year through the online, and it was very tough.
Very tough, but no pain, no gain. It's always known. If there is no pain, there is no gain. And that's why we have to suffer a little bit in order to move. We should not look for 1 or 2 years. We should look at, you want your graduate, your son, my daughters, to be fit to compete against their counterparts from other countries or not. Or you want them just to have a certificate which you'll be happy that I graduated. Plus, and I had the privilege of being part of the previous parliament, where we approved the new law for the branches of international universities. Very proud to see now they are acting in the new administrative capital. Most of them are high-tech. And imagine that their fees is not cheap, and there is waiting line for students to join them. And why? Because they want their kids to know how to compete in the global world. So this is a good indicator. I mean, we look at why these universities came to Egypt, why they're coming here, why they're opening their branches here, why they're going into technology, high technology, engineering, pharmaceutical, medicine, and you have queues of Egyptian students who are willing to pay thousands and thousands of pounds. These are the generations that we should focus in. These are the generations which will run Egypt in 20 or 30 years from now. Should not look today at, I need my kids to graduate from Thanawi Amma. I'm sorry to say, it's more important to help the government, to help the president with all what he's doing as an infrastructure. And at the end of the day, if you cannot run this infrastructure, then what is Egypt?
Indeed. Indeed. Right, getting back to what we were speaking about and moving on with. Yeah. And speaking on the international level and describing the Egyptian economy and its relations with the international world.
Sure.
And we have been seeing the leadership trying to promote Egypt on different scales and with different meetings with different heads of states and to even to the CEOs of some of the big companies worldwide. How do you view steps or how do you view our foreign policy, particularly economic foreign policy?
I always used to say that if the president himself does not move internationally away from political issues, then we are not going to move forward. Why? Because the head of state, when he comes and travels and meet, he built a relationship. And I think if you compare between the visits of the president since 2014 and the visits today, he is more welcomed, he's more respected, he's more appreciated in the efforts. For instance, the European Union. Do you know that the European Union praised the president because he is the only southern Mediterranean country which controlled the illegal immigration? And that's why they are very keen to work with Egypt and to help its developments and to help its sustainability. So when you have our presidents meeting and doing this kind of visits to different European countries, which is actually, Italy is one of the largest, in addition to Saudi Arabia, is one of the largest recipient of our exports. So again, his moves, it makes a lot of changes, not politically only, but also economically. And this supported by the reforms that we have suffered.
Yes.
We suffered from elimination of subsidies, we suffered from many other aspects, but at the end of the day, you look at our figures financially and economically, they are the one which is attracting the foreign direct investment. Inflation rate is under control. If we're talking today about 4.9%, Egypt is among the economy of Egypt is among the positive ones during pandemics. This is unbelievably a positive sign. And thirdly, tourism. We are among the very few countries in the world where tourism is regaining its momentum back. So all of this, add to it, of course, the political stability, add to it the infrastructures that we are doing, add to it that we have today a very solid 2030 strategic plan, which is composed from sub-plans. So when you add all of this, if you are a foreign investor, where would you like to go? In a country which is developing, its GDP currently is 3.6, expected to be over 6% in the next 2-3 years, or you are going to stay where the GDPs are almost negative or barely making 1%. Again, these CEOs and the chairmen of companies, when they come to Egypt, they are not coming for the love of Egypt, but they come for the love of the economy and the development that is taking place, which is appraised by the IMF, by the World Bank, and by the European Union.
Because they are aware that it's a win-win situation, right?
Of course.
When we're speaking here about 3.6, what we are at the times of Corona, because we were supposed or we were expected to grow more than that.
Yeah. But other countries are not even 1%.
Did not do, yes.
That's why I
indeed,
say this is an outstanding achievement.
Yes, and that goes, by the way, with the international institutions. We're speaking here about the evaluation of the IMF. We're speaking about here the economists, the Fitch, and Moody. All these.
All of them.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
But once the IMF gave the blessing, that's it.
Right. When we're speaking here about our foreign policy or our economic foreign policy with countries, we have to differentiate between, for instance, our how we deal with big powers, including the US and the EU and Russia, and how we deal with less powerful or economies or less powerful economies worldwide. How are we dealing? What's our foreign policy or economic foreign policy, and how we diversify our relations with the strong economies and the less stronger one?
I think we cannot neglect what are we regionally facing today with Ethiopia. We cannot neglect what we are facing today with Turkey. We cannot neglect the different opinions that took place during the Security Council. So for me to evaluate the political moves of Egypt is very positive, because we are playing a diplomacy rather than confrontation. And so if we confront, then you build enemies. But when you use diplomacy, you actually make people wonder, what are you up to? And I think this is very important. Our diplomacy, the rules that we are playing, it makes people, at least it neutralizes your enemies, because they cannot say, oh, look, he is trying to be offensive, or he's trying to be confrontive. But I think this is why, God bless our foreign minister and our president.
Yes, but I was speaking from the economic side, not the political one. And when I meant here, I meant how are we dealing with different economies, the big ones like the US and the EU. And because we are aware that we had our ups and downs with our relations with those countries. But recently we have seen the European Union, some of the big countries coming to for investing in Egypt in a way or another. We've seen some of the American also companies interested in coming to Egypt. I'm speaking about our economic foreign policy and how we deal with different countries and how we deal with our different interests.
Our focus, as I can see today, is with the European Union. Why? Because you still have a change in the regime in the United States. So things are not clear yet. Because President Biden so far is still focusing on the pandemic and how to deal with Russia and
China.
And China. So I think we are still, maybe it's me.
I have no idea. Please continue now.
I think we are focused more on the EU, and obviously there is what we call a partnership priorities agreement built with the European Union. It is a win-win situation. It's an agreement made between the European Union and Egypt because they want from us certain protection of their southern borders, and we want also to develop our economies. And so the priorities here will actually give us the chance to develop our economies with the help and the support of the European Union. So this is very important. When you look also at Africa, and I mentioned the diplomacy of Egypt, it is also because we have a lot of economic stack now in sub-Saharan Africa. And so confronting is a question mark because you might lose the support that you have economically. You have so many private sector companies that are actually building their projects in sub-Saharan Africa. So if we look from the economic terms, I think the outreach of both the government and the private sector is actually gaining a lot of momentum in terms of supporting our gross national product or gross domestic product.
If I want to propagate Egypt today, how would I say, or how do you view Egypt's opportunities for foreign direct investments?
I view it as a positive because of what the reports coming in terms of supporting our economy. I view it as positive because we are, I think today I can say that we are a global power economically because of what do you need in the future? You need energy, okay? And you need scientific research. And so we are, I think, in the right track of being a global player in energy. And energy, I mean petrochemicals, energy, I mean natural gas, energy, I mean petroleum. And so these are very important parts. So if you look at foreign direct investment and who is coming to Egypt, whether Siemens, whether other global players, they are coming for developing in this area. Plus, currencies devaluate, they inflate, but natural resources like gold, it still has its own value, where before the reserves were based on gold, not just hard currency reserves. So I think foreign direct investment will be still attracting to the mega projects, which is what we need. Why? Because these mega projects will need feeding industries. And so this is where our economy will grow in terms of local economic developments.
President Sisi himself has stated that the state is heading to make revolutionary road to upgrade the economy in all stages over the coming years. What did he mean by that? And what are we doing in this concern?
Basically, actually going to the strategic plan. You know, if you look at what are the dimensions of the strategic plan, and
yes,
so
indeed.
There are three dimensions. There are the social dimension, and that's why you have the health, you have the education, and this is very important, and you have the environment dimension. A lot of projects are taking place on the green economy.
Yes. And
you have now next year, inshallah, we'll have the first electric Egyptian car. And you have a lot of actually public transportation are run by electricity or by natural gas. So this is, again, green economy is a second dimension. And the third is the economic developments. And so, again, you cannot mention economic developments without the infrastructure. And so I think when he talks about this, he's talking about reinforcing the strategic plan that he actually came to the Parliament back in 2016. And he spoke about it as this is his vision as the head of Republic of Egypt.
You spoke about the social dimension. You also spoke about returning to infrastructure, which is a base for everything.
Yeah, sure.
Then we have here to speak about some of the presidential initiatives. And here we've followed up
Decent life.
all, yes, exactly, decent life initiative. And that is not just to elevate the living standard of people, but also it kind of link the country, as you said at the very beginning, all together. And or the countryside with the urban side of the country. Let me first take your. How do you look to such an initiative? How do you view it from the big picture?
The title for me is misleading. Decent life, it's bigger than the issue of decent life. It's building sustainable communities. Because when you look at the details of the initiative, it's not just to renew houses. It's to change the structure of slum areas into a decent area which is surrounded by all services needed for a good life. So when you say decent life, for me it means a good house. For me it means a good place. That's what I mean. You know. But the project itself is bigger than that title for me. Why? Because when you look at what is included aside from, yes, changing from builds of, you know, these huts into houses, decent, you know, all of these details. But there will be schools built, there will be services built, hospitals, clinics around these villages. And that's when you look at the target, which is surprising. I don't know whether many Egyptians know about that. The target is to help 90 million individuals in Egypt. So decent life for me is a narrow title, but the idea is much bigger.
We're speaking also about giving opportunities for youth, because we're also speaking about decent life is not just, as you said, respectively, building houses, but rather creating opportunities for a whole community.
Exactly.
And part of that was other presidential initiatives which were supporting the SMEs and the macro and micro projects.
Sure. Yeah.
And supporting also entrepreneurship and startups and all this. How do you view this point, and how does this reflect on, or the implication of this on the economy?
The implication of SMEs and on entrepreneurs and venture projects is on improving the level of employment, because no economies in the world grow from mega projects only. They also grow from the SMEs. And so when you look at Egypt's diversity of its population, many of them are not focused in just urban areas, but many of them are in rural areas. Definitely there are industrial zones. A lot of Japanese and Chinese companies are coming now in the Upper Egypt side because of the incentive provided to them. But these projects, they are mega projects. Around them, they should be supported by the SMEs, which what I call it the feeding industries. The same thing goes for tourism. No mega project in tourism will be working without restaurants, without coffee shops, without gallerias, without art areas. And these all are SMEs. You cannot have these except from locals. And I think when you talk about this initiative, you're talking about helping the youth of Egypt. I had the chance to speak in a conference when I said that we are a youth generation. 60% of our population is below the age of 35 years old. And so this is a very strong base that we have to nourish, we have to support, and we have to help. And that's why the initiative of SMEs fits the initiative of Decent Life, because the feeding services around these new communities is going to be SMEs. It's not going to be big projects.
And I guess that requires us requires all the stakeholders, I mean here, the governmental institutions, the leadership and all, even the private sector, all the stakeholders to come together for.
That's why the challenge, as mentioned by the IMF in their report, was you have to include, the two things: private sector and create more opportunities for youth.
Indeed. Unfortunately, my time is out. I would have loved to continue our questions because I'm so. This is very rich conversation. Dr. Ibrahim Hegazy, Professor of Economics, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure, Mona, and I appreciate your cooperation with me during our discussion.
Thank you so much. And dear viewers, many thanks for watching. I guess that takes us to next week. Next week we'll be having other important topics. Until then, good night.